I would like to start posing one or two questions to the panelists here, but I'm also going to put the spotlight back on our panelists. Each of you heard each other. If you want to ask questions to your fellow panelists and probe them a little bit, I will be happy to entertain that. And in the meantime, to give you a chance to think, I'm going to go ahead and ask one or two of you those questions. So rather than the audience asking us, and I know all of you want to do that, but for the moment, I'm going to spotlight here. If you want to ask each other questions and push, just give me a signal and be short. But as you think about it, I'm going to start asking Jay the first question. Jay, throughout this conference, we have been, including here, we have been hearing about wanting to partner with the private sector, wanting to engage with the private sector. You are from the private sector. What would make you want to engage much more effectively, or what is holding you back from engaging? And I don't mean you personally, I mean from the perspective of business and private sector. What would you want to put on the table for everyone to hear? How could you engage more effectively?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something which is fascinating me, spending time here with so many people who are really not from the private sector. It is fascinating to really see that there are so many solutions and we really don't communicate enough. I believe that both the paths are on the same goal. I mean, we are all looking at resilience, productivity improvement, sustainability, making the farmers more profitable, making the rural household more sustainable. And we try to work in a very focused way. We have quarterly performance numbers. I find some of the timelines are very different, very frustrating for private sector to look at some of the paperwork required by the multilateral organizations. So there are a lot of challenges, I think, but the goals are the same. I think there has to be a lot more communication, interaction. I mean, things like meetings like this, where if we can, share some thoughts. I think it can. There is a lot of work to be done because we are more action-oriented. We look at results. We want finite period results, or we are very accountable. I know that even the multilaterals and the NGOs all accountable, but we have a shorter horizon. I think there is a lot of technology available, and I think there needs to be we need to work together, and I think it'll be wonderful.
Thank you very much, Jay. I turn next to Sean, and I will come and look at your raised hands in a moment, but I turn next to Sean. Sean, NGOs are very much at the front line, right at the ground level, right with the communities. You mentioned capacity issues. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because where are you recruiting your capacity? And how then, in turn, are you able to build a capacity? Is it that you should be recruiting from outside, from inside? Where is it? How do we pay for it?
Okay, thank you. I think that the answer to that question is perhaps a little bit more around the thinking of partnerships, as was mentioned at the far end. I think that there's greater need for a back and forth between the NGOs and the research institutions, the research organizations. I think that we as an organization, we need more help around the analytical frameworks which underpin our theories of change. We need a little bit more help when we think about system analysis and the rigor around that. So I think that's where we need help. The discussion on metrics. I also think there's an opportunity for greater partnership. There's a lot of thinking done now already by the technical working group around measurement and how you measure. And I think now is the opportunity for us to take that thinking and apply it. Does it really work? And how does it get applied? And how do we then take the results to feedback, to improve the research, to improve the thinking? I think also that we need to think better about our engagement with African research organizations and with the national organizations. at a national level and at a more district level in terms of those research partnerships.
Thank you very much. Daibon, your hand was up.
Thank you, Raju. I want to ask the researchers among us. It would appear that most research is principled on the fact that you should publish or perish. So a lot of documents are on the shelves, in the libraries and so on, which have no relevance to a smallholder farmer. Are you likely to change that principle soon so that you have more focus on smallholder farmers?
Karen?
I can speak to that very clearly as someone who came in relatively recently directing one of the CGIAR research programs. I can assure you that the message we have is you achieve impact or you perish. Now, in order to achieve impact, we of course have to have good quality research. So we do remain in the business of publication. That's how we interact with our other researchers. But we are under very clear instructions that our work has to connect with those who need it. We are an organization of applied research. So we need to connect with the implementation partners, we need to connect with the NGO, particularly we need to connect with the farmers because that's where we get our impact. So I hope you rest assured that we definitely take that on board, and I hope you're already seeing the results of that.
Thank you, Karen. I have Prabhu first and then Anita.
Okay, so as the only academic on this panel, I should respond to that. It's true that much of the academic literature is very much theoretical and not reality-based and publication-oriented. But you're finding that increasingly donors who are supporting academic research are also asking for impact-oriented research. And you're also finding that high-quality impact-oriented research has good publication potential. And you do see increasingly much of the development research coming out, has field research in it and is very much impact-oriented. My program at Cornell is very much designed as a field research program, and my students are required to spend 1 year in rural India and do their field work in rural India and come back and write their thesis from that. So as my program evolves, you'll see a lot more of publications which are field-oriented, impact-oriented publications.
Anita, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that as representing the CGIAR Consortium Office, which is the body that's responsible for reviewing some of the proposals and making recommendations. We look at research proposals to ensure that they are aligned for impact, and in fact that they have partners that can take the research program to impact. So rest assured, impact is clearly one of the high priority focus for us.
So Sean, do you want to come in back again? Is your question partly addressed? Or? Yeah?
I think,
Don't be shy.
how are you feeling, smallholder farmers?
Go right ahead.
Are you feeling okay?
So then I want to come, Then I want to come to Khalid for a moment. Khalid, you talked about knowledge. You talked about investing in knowledge. We have this conversation here. What knowledge do you feel, what would you want to ask Anita and Karen in terms of what, we heard from Daibon, but what do you think are the big knowledge gaps that for an agency like ATA to be able to help contribute? What's the next frontier? What's missing?
So I think what's missing is not necessarily the content itself, but rather how do you get that content down, as Pierre said, down to the farmer. And in many instances, the adaptation to local environments is what's really important. And for us, the gap there exists in the national research organizations and national knowledge institutions, not just the public research institutions, but also universities. And how do we build their capacity, and how do we link them not only to the CG centers and international knowledge organizations, but among themselves, domestically. So I think that's one thing that requires investment. Another is the fact that many of the international researchers at the CG centers at international universities typically come from the domestic and public national organizations. So I think there needs to be some investment domestically, both by the national governments as well as development partners, to retain some of that capacity within the public system. Some of that is certainly a requirement of investment, but it's also creating the right incentive systems within the public's knowledge institutions. And it's usually not an investment just in capital, but the kind of working environment that these researchers have in the national research institutions. They don't, and often, of course, they all want to be paid more, but sometimes it's just access to good equipment, access to transportation and vehicles that allows them to get out to the field. So those types of basic investments, I think, need to be made to ensure that the public, global public goods that the CG centers are developing are adapted and reach the farmers using the national research organizations.
So I follow from there. You talked about knowledge, you talked about disseminating, you talked about so forth. I come now to Dominique, because Dominique, one of your points, I think your last point was evidence for the donors and others to continue to invest. What evidence, I don't want to ask what evidence, I want to ask, how do you generate the demand? Is it that they don't have the evidence, or is it that they don't even care about the evidence when you have it? Where would you want to, where's the balance?
Well, indeed, it's a very important point that, as I was saying, this is the critical part that we have to bring this evidence to the donors, because obviously there has been a big momentum on the issue of resilience over the last couple of years, and we want to keep this momentum very high. So to generate the evidence is very critical. For example, now we have a number of programs that are ongoing. These programs have been designed on the basis of a resilience analysis. It's important that throughout the process we measure the impact and that we are able to document the impact of these programs to build a body of evidence that we can provide to our counterparts in donors agencies that will in turn help them make the case and document our points to generate interest from their policymakers and taxpayers, as I was saying. Yeah.
There's an interesting time scale here.